Welcome to the Portland Amateur Radio Club February 8th, 2021 meeting. And this will be our agenda for tonight. We'll start off with anybody that's a first-time park meeting participant, introductions. Then we'll go to repeater participant check-ins. I don't see the repeater on yet, but when it does come on, we'll have them check in. And I think I have the first-time park participants down there twice. We'll do announcements and news. We just have a couple items tonight, or a few items. And then tonight's main topic is going to be a 2-meter easy to build antenna that evidently I think has actually been tried on 442, and I have not tried it yet on that band, but evidently if you can tune it correctly, it does work there too. And then finally, any member questions and comments will be the last thing that we do. So if this is your first time park meeting, if you would like to introduce yourself, you just let us know what your name, your call sign if you have one, how you heard about park, and what brought you to park and ham radio. Is this anybody's first time meeting? Hi, Robert.
How you doing?
Good.
I'm Robert Taylor. I'm an ARO with the St. John's NET team. Also a provisional member of Multnomah County Aries, and an Aries call, I guess it's last night, or net call last night, the reference to your presentation tonight about the antenna build. So I thought I would sit in. So it's my first meeting, and nice to meet you all.
Great, thank you very much. Anybody else? This is their first time.
Yeah, Jim Carlton here, KJ7 SVD, South Burlingame ARO to be. I'm working on a certification at this time.
Nice.
Heard about you through, I think it was our team leader, but lots of ways to find out about you. Nice to be
very
with
nice. Well, thank you, and thanks for joining.
No, you can't see me, but
sorry,
go ahead. Yeah, my name is Glenn Sockelmer. My call sign is Whiskey 77 Sierra Victor November. First time here. Been a part of park, but due to medical, I go in and out. So this is my first time here.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining. Yeah, usually we have these meetings in person, and we will eventually go back to that. But I think we're talking about just keeping the Zoom meeting for anybody that doesn't want to drive at night, or even for me, I'm in Oregon City, so it takes a while to get up to North Portland where we are, where we usually meet, rather. Well, welcome, Glenn. Thank you. Anybody else first time here?
Yeah, I'm Per Biasa, KG7 TTR. I'm first time caller. I got my license a couple of weeks ago and have been going to the EC Ham online Zoom meetings that have been very helpful, and pretty excited about this antenna build. So this will be great.
Great. Nice seeing you again, and welcome.
Thanks.
I'm Marilee Carr, South Burlingame Net team lead. We heard about you from Bruce Schaefer, and it's another way to learn about radio, which we need to grow in.
Absolutely. Yeah, ham radio is great. It's sort of like a umbrella term for a whole bunch of sub-hobbies. There are a lot of things in ham radio I've never even tried before. Maybe someday, but well, welcome, Marilee. Thank you.
Good evening. This is Russell Graham, Whiskey 7 Mike Yankee Charlie. I just joined, and I just found out about you guys on the web, and I thought I'd join and check in.
Great. Thank you very much for checking in. Is there anything that in particular about ham radio that you're interested in?
I've always loved antenna builds, and I always love learning new things about different ways of doing things with antennas.
Very good. Well, you should have fun for tonight's meeting. Thank you, and thanks for joining. Anybody else first time park
I can jump.
participant? Go ahead.
I can jump in. My name's Win Smith, and this is my first meeting. I recently got a GMRS license, and then a couple weeks later, I went for the ham, and now I have KJ7 TVW.
Congratulations. Is there anything in particular, Win, that why you got your ham radio license?
I played with electronics my whole life. Certainly not an engineer, but I was interested in getting a radio for the rest of my family to use. And I know they will not be pursuing their ham license, but after getting the GMRS license and digging in a little further, I became interested in going ahead and getting my ham license.
That's great. Yeah, I know. The test is fairly easy to do. It does require a few hours of study, but once you take the test, as long as you remember to renew every 10 years, it's fairly easy to keep. Unfortunately, we can't talk everybody into getting their ham radio license, but GMS should come in very handy with your family, though.
I expect it will.
Cool. Well, welcome and thanks for checking in with us. And Barry, do you want to go?
Yeah, hi, Barry Newman, KJ7, let's see, XPT, I think it is. And I'm actually hoping to switch that to remember vanity call sign before I actually start doing stuff. So something like with my initials, I have an application in for that actually, not because I want to be fancy, but just because it's easier. Anyway, I'm a former net team leader and involved with net program, and I got involved. I actually got my ham license mostly for disaster preparedness and just general preparedness as well. Just a great way to communicate. And it seems like fun, and another way to spend like a whole lot of time and money.
Mm-hmm.
So because that's what I do. I find things that I can spend like a whole lot of time and money in, in any way. And I think probably, I'm not sure how I got a notice from you guys, but somehow I did. So anyway, here I am.
Well, welcome and thank you, Barry. And a lot of people that are also here are into emergency communications and just being prepared, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think just about anybody that has a handheld is that much further in being prepared. So that's great. Congratulations on getting your ticket, and I wish you luck on getting a vanity call sign. It's great you're doing it now that you can avoid the $35 fee that's coming up in a few months. Welcome, Barry. Thank you.
Actually, it wasn't avoiding the $35 fee. It was mostly rather than start sending out messages.
The presidency is not, it's a.
Yeah, that's a great idea because your call sign is essentially like your name. So you don't want to change your name too many times.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Barry. Anybody else? This is your first time?
This is John McBride here. I don't have a call sign yet as I just passed my technician exam this Saturday.
Congratulations.
Thank you. For the record, I failed it by 1 the first time, and that steamed me up enough to, I passed it by 5 the second time around, but pass fail going out the door. So looking forward to learning how to build a pretty sweet antenna. I got a little handheld Baofeng in the middle and the meantime, just so I can kind of just listen in and maybe pick up on some etiquette and stuff, kind of do the unofficial education part. But I also got a big Yaesu FT847 that I'll be looking forward to hooking up and getting on the air just as soon as I can. I'm actually in a similar situation as Barry where I don't have a call sign yet, but my late grandfather was a hammy out in the bush, out in the field. And so just as soon as I get my initial technician call sign, I'll be applying as a vanity for his old call sign.
Very nice. Yeah, I know a lot of people that do that. That's great. Kind of carry the tradition on. And that is a very nice radio. I don't think they sell it anymore, but it is. It's a very popular radio because it's very capable. So congratulations on passing your ticket, and you too. Again, good luck with your vanity call sign.
Thanks, Max.
Yeah. Anybody else? This is your first time that you are joining the park monthly meeting.
Hey Max, this is Jesse. Oh,
This is K7RUN, and we are joining the ARC monthly meeting.
Thanks, John. And for those of you who can see the people in the gallery view, this is the repeater. We do retransmit this, the Portland Amateur Radio Club monthly meeting on the 14718 repeater, which is one of the repeaters in Portland that is managed by John White and Park.
I am also new
Hi,
enough
Stevie.
to not know which meeting I am in. There's a monthly one and then the other one I was in. Yeah,
Yes.
is that correct? Okay, just making sure I'm on the same page with you guys. And I actually did get I got my test pass, so I got my call sign and stuff. So I'm really looking forward to this build because it's exactly the direction that I was going. So.
And do you know your call sign?
I do, yeah. Kilo Juliet 7 Uniform Echo Hotel.
Very nice. Well,
So hi,
congratulations on passing the test.
Yeah, and I'm very much looking forward to the live meetings because the hands-on learning. But I'm looking forward to this build a lot. So I'll
yes,
Thanks,
this will be our first anything build over Zoom. So this will be somewhat interesting.
It's very YouTube. So I'm in my safe zone right now. This is a great space. Right on.
Well, welcome. And I think we had one more person at least that new first-time park member or first-time park meeting.
yeah, Max. Hey, this is Jesse. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my camera's not working. I'm having some issues with the computer. So yeah, I've attended the beginner meetings, which are incredible. So thank you for those. But this is my first actual meeting, monthly meeting. So I just set up my FT60R and did a check-in on the net. Sounds like it worked and I programmed it correctly. So I got a shout out to Marino for the email back and forth and giving me some recommendations as you did for a radio. It finally came in after being on back order for a month and got it set up. It's a pretty sweet rig. So you guys made some great recommendations. Thank you.
Absolutely. And that's awesome. It is kind of interesting that they're on back order. That's the first time I've ever seen them on back order, but I'm glad you got your radio. And that's just still the same radio I use. I know there's more expensive and more radios out there with other bells and whistles, but I really like the FT60.
Got enough for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jesse.
Hey, thanks.
Anybody else first time park meeting?
Can you hear Jack?
Yeah, hi, Jack.
I'm in Great Falls, Virginia right now, but we have a home in Portland. We will be moving out of our permanent, or I should say what has been our legal domicile here in Virginia in a couple of months. Lots of things to get rid of. 82 years old. We've been living in this house for about 35 years and 2 lifetime collections of stuff, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
Call sign W2ZL. I've heard about Park because I'm interested in ham radio and interested to find out what's going on in Portland. So it was a pleasure to be able to find your organization and to get my name on the list.
That's awesome. Yeah. And we used to be that you had to be in Portland in order to attend our meetings, but because of the magic of Zoom, we're, welcome and thank you very much for joining from the East Coast.
Well, it's 10:21 p.m.
Yeah.
I'm not going to last much longer, but I'll just listen in and finally fall asleep. Thanks for letting me enjoy the Zoom today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jack. And anybody else? First time meeting? Hi, Michael.
Okay, yeah, I'm Michael Brown, N7AXC. I'm a general with code since the 70s and mostly inactive all that time. I've been aware of Park for some time. but just finally taking the jump to maybe get involved. I'm employed as a radio engineering consultant, so I build broadcast AM and FM radio stations, much like John White does, actually. And so I know him very well, but just dabbling my feet here and see what's going on.
Well, welcome and thanks for joining. Yeah, you mentioned that you were a radio engineer, and John White is our resident radio engineer. He's one of the people that takes care of the repeaters and other technical equipment that we have. Well, welcome. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Anybody else first time like to introduce yourself?
My name is Dave. I'm KJ7DTT. My first time attending a meeting. I know about Park, but I haven't attended before. I'm into emergency communications and seeing how that can fit and learning as much as I can about all, as you said, all the different sub-hobbies of ham radio.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's quite a few from old-time Morse code up to the newest digital. Marino sent an email out, and I think he even posted it on Groups.io, which is our the Portland Amateur Radio Club's sort of like bulletin board where you can go kind of post different things. I'll see if Marino can put up a link to our group, and anybody that's on right now, you're more than welcome to join. There's at least two very popular groups. One is the Park announcements, and we will put in things like meeting announcements for this meeting and other activities like field day. But then there's also a RagTube group or bulletin board that if you have something new that you want to share, like a new digital mode, then feel free to post or reply to other people's posts there. So welcome, Dave. Thank you very much for joining. Anybody else first time?
Yeah, hello. I'm new here as well. My name is Richard, K3MTB. I'm relatively new ham, been licensed for a couple months, and I think I found your group. I was just Googling various repeaters in the area, came across your website, saw about your monthly meeting, was very interested in your antenna project. So I'm here to learn all about it today.
Awesome. Thank you very much for joining, Richard.
I'm also new. Hope all y'all can hear me. My name's Andrew. I took the technician class test today and passed. And Donna and a couple other people pointed me towards this group. So I figured I'd hop on and, see who I could meet and learn something, because I'm very new to radio, have really no experience other than studying for the test.
Awesome. Well, first off, congratulations on passing your test. Did you receive your call sign yet?
I have no call sign. I'm
okay.
flying blind here.
Well, fortunately,
I'm glad you made it.
Thank you.
Well, fortunately, Herb and his group are very quick, and since everything's done electronically, you should get your call sign probably tomorrow.
Been refreshing my inbox.
That's great.
Nothing yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I took my test and passed. I had to wait over 2 weeks to get my license, and that just seemed like an eternity. Everything was done by mail back then. Well, welcome, Andrew. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Anybody else first time? Like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Bridget Rigo. My call sign is Kilo Juliet 7, Juliet Uniform Foxtrot. This is my first time at Park. I heard about you from your Thursday night meetings. I'm part of the Rose City Hollywood Net group, and I'm just here to learn more about radio.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Bridget, for joining. Is there anything in particular that that you are interested in?
I don't know where to begin. There's a lot. there's a lot. I'm still trying to figure out how to program my radio. I need to learn about antennas. There's just a lot I just need to learn about. So
that's awesome. Well, yeah, keep coming back and joining us for Zoom, both Monday, second Monday of the month, which is our regular park meeting.
Monday, that's what okay, just once a month, second Monday?
Yes. Yeah, so this is the regular park meeting. And for those of you listening on the repeater, this is the Portland Amateur Radio Club meeting. And we meet every second Monday of the month starting at 7 p.m. And then we also, I have another slide a little bit further that talks about the beginning ham radio meeting, which is every Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Well, welcome, Bridget. Thank you. And did we get everybody or anybody else is your first time to a Portland Amateur Radio Club meeting? Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for participating. So we're also broadcasting this meeting, the audio portion of it on the park repeater, the 147.18 repeater. And repeater participants or people who are listening on the Portland Amateur Radio Club repeater, you can actually ask questions and just interrupt us by giving your call sign. And then we can, you can ask the question and then or comment and we can get back to you. Thank you, John White, for setting up the repeater so that we can do this. And if anybody is actually listening on the repeater, if you'd like to check in with us, feel free to give your call sign now.
Kilo India 7 Romeo Mike Kilo and AG7MO checking in on the repeater.
Well, welcome. Thank you. Anybody else listening to the repeater that'd like to check in, please just give your call sign through the repeater. All right. We'll come back to the repeater. Just a few announcements. A reminder that March 13th and 14th, which is a weekend, is the QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo. Since we're not doing things like Hamvention or Pacificon this year, those of you who still want to kind of have the ham experience without having to travel very far, this is going to be a very large event. The first one was in August 2020. That was attended by over 16,000 hams. And they also allow you to, if you register, have a 30-day on-demand viewing of all the speakers after the event. They're going to have speakers and presentations, panel discussions, and some kit building workshops. The last one was free. This one they are asking $10 registration and $12 at the door, which I assume means a same day registration. And you can look that up. I think if you just Google QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo, you'll find all the information about that. And Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you could give us your announcement about the fox hunt.
Yeah, excuse me here. I'll try to keep it brief, and especially for some of those who are starting out. Most of what you're familiar with is VHF and UHF, and there's that whole other world of ham radio that's on the high frequency, or short wave, which many of us kind of dabble and mess around in, and that's an area that's of particular interest to me, along with Morse code. There's quite a few people still doing Morse code. In fact, it's becoming more and more popular. This particular event occurs every Tuesday and Thursday evening on the 40-meter band in the CW portion. It's called a fox hunt. It's a little different than what you may have heard of some VHF or UHF fox hunts, which is a totally different kind of event. This is actually an event that covers at least the United States and Canada, and including other countries. And basically all it is that one station, or actually two stations as it is, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast, are designated as a Fox. And the idea is for all the other stations to try to work this Fox. In other words, me, I'll be using my call sign. The other limitation is that it's only 5 watts, which for the HF band, is quite a challenge because many stations run 100 watts or 1,000 watts, high power. So this kind of makes it doubly challenging, but also a great deal of fun. So that's going to be tomorrow evening from 6, from 6 to 7:30 on 40 meters. And if by chance you do have HF capability and do want to join in, you'll have to hunt me down. I'm going to be between 7030 and 7050. And, basically what I'll be doing is calling CQ Fox in Morse code. And then your challenge is to try to work me. I'm going to be doing this out at Max's place because he's got huge antennas and he's got a quiet location. So it really helps. And it's a lot of fun, I think. The world of HF radio is entirely different in terms of the types of stations you work, the distances, sometimes the bands, like 40 meters, you can work worldwide. Sometimes it seems like you can't get out of your backyard, but that's known as propagation, which relates to the ionospheric conditions. And I think, I don't know if it was earlier this year, but it was last year, I managed to work a great deal of stations all over the United States. I think I managed to work about 35 or 40 different states in an hour and a half. So if that's something of interest, you can drop me an email, or if you do have 40 meter capability, I encourage you to get on and try to work me. So that's it in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dan. And for those of you who are new, Dan is going to be running 5 watts on HF and not using a repeater or any other assistance like from the internet, is actually able to talk to people in Morse code across the nation, anywhere from somebody else here in Oregon all the way over to New York or Maine on 5 watts of power, which is not a lot of electricity. Thanks, Dan.
Oh, I was just going to
say,
conditions over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, the solar cycle will be picking up and you'll be able to have a great deal of success with low power on HF radio. So if that's something that interests you, and definitely consider that. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of aspects to it. And there is actually some disaster aspects as well for being able to communicate out of your, local area and being able to communicate. And in fact, many of us do communicate worldwide. I think right now I'm approaching about 200 countries around the world that I've worked with 5 watts on Morse code. So, just another challenge. And I don't have, an expensive station or a huge antenna, but it just is another fun aspect of the hobby that you can enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dan. And one of the new things that we've started this year is the Beginning Ham Radio series. This is a weekly informal Zoom session, and it's every Thursday at 6 p.m. We meet for about 90 minutes. So half of an hour is kind of taken up by a weekly topic. And if you're on our email list, you'll know what that weekly topic is. The weekly topics are actually also listed on the Portland Amateur Radio Club website, which is www.w7lt.org. And in the Beginning Ham Radio series page on that website, you'll see not only our past videos of past Beginning Ham Radio meetings, but you'll also see the upcoming topics. And really the goal of these meetings is just to help people get up and running with their new radio. And that's why we kind of change out topics, and they're all kind of designed for beginner hams. And then we have lots of time for Q&A. So the last 60 minutes, we try to make it about an hour, where anybody can ask questions on either the nightly topic or anything ham radio related in general. So I invite you to those meetings, and if you're on our mailing list, you should be getting those emails. And just a reminder, because it is February, we the Portland Amateur Radio Club membership is taking dues for 2021. It's a pretty incredible deal at $18 for individual and $24 for family. And the nice thing is that we are set up to take either a check or PayPal, either one. We used to take cash, I think, when we were in person. But if you just go onto the website under membership, you can select either family or individual membership and pay through PayPal. And we appreciate all membership because that goes to help with substantially with the repeater fund to help kind of keep the repeaters up and on the air. And then did anybody else have any news announcements?
Hey, Max, this is Neil here.
Hey, Neil.
I believe I was supposed to give an update on the nominating committee candidates.
Yeah, that'd be great. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is the preliminary report for the 2021 elections, and I'll list the candidates that we currently have for the 2021-2022 year club officers position. And this is the list that we have as of February 8th, 2021. So for president, we have Max Sabo, who's currently our vice president. Looking at vice president, we have Dan Presley, who's currently our one-year director. For one of the one-year director positions, we're looking at Aaron Johnson. He's an incumbent. Another one-year director is John Rollins, who's the current president. Three-year director is John White. He's an incumbent. The recording secretary, George Noble, again an incumbent. Membership secretary, Wayne Splan. And then treasurer is Pete Rodenbaugh. And last two are also incumbents there. So the elections of the offices will be held next month during the March 8th, 2021 membership meeting. As Max mentioned earlier about membership dues, members need to be in good standing with dues paid prior to the meeting to be able to participate in the elections. So, and then also, if there's anybody else who is still interested in one of these positions, please feel free to contact me directly. Or if you send it to the club, it will get to me as well too, and we can get you added to the list. Okay.
Awesome.
Any
Thanks, Neil.
questions? Hey, and I'll go ahead and put my email in the chat here for anybody that needs that.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. And do you know, do you have to attend next meeting in order to vote, or is there another way to vote?
And that's a good question. I'm not sure if Pete kind of sent this over to me. I don't see anything on that here. I kind of thought that we did it normally during the meetings, but I don't know if John White or anybody else knows of that, but if not, we can check into it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Neil. I really appreciate that.
You bet.
Neil's volunteered for at least 2 years now, helping out with the elections. So thank you very much for that.
You bet.
Anybody else with news or announcements for the good of the order?
You might go ahead and break down this. Say we're essentially
I think Pete was gonna. Pete, are you able to?
So, and I've got one.
Cool. Oh, and Neil put his email there in the chat. So anybody that has any questions or would like to be added to the list for nominations, or for voting, I guess. Take a look at the chat there. And Pete, did you have anything?
Yes, the question was raised about if there was a way to vote if you weren't attending the Zoom meeting and you weren't able to get on the repeater. John and I discussed it here. We think we could probably accept votes by email. And so it's just a matter of, you know, I would receive the votes at the club address. The problem would be we wouldn't be able to, you know, have immediate results. Does this sound familiar? Certainly people could vote ahead of time, but I would vet each ballot based on whether they're a member or not with Wayne's help. But you would email the club at w7lt .org. I think that's right. Anyway, and then as far as how we're going to run the election, we haven't discussed it for the next Zoom meeting, but we'll be prepared to do it then. But we'll send out an announcement about the upcoming election and how you can vote.
Sorry not to be more chatty there. You caught me in the middle of a hassle with the trying to log into this web conference. It's going on right now.
Okay, sorry, go ahead, Pete.
So we'll send an announcement out about the election well in advance, so everybody knows that it's coming and can be prepared to vote in whatever way they can. So I think that's all I have for now. And thank you, Neil. Okay. Excellent report.
There's an announcement you can make.
Apparently, this just in. Apparently, John has another announcement. Let's see. So I'm going to read it. Oh, he's talking about Michael Brown. Michael Brown has joined us tonight. Michael Brown was the host at the picnic that we had at the Stonehenge Tower up on in the West Hills. That's been a few years ago now. And Kent Randalls, K7YXZ, was the tour director at the tower the day we were there. So, but Michael Brown was the host. He allowed that to happen. And thank you, Michael. We had a great time, and the facility is awesome up there at Stonehenge. That's what you might know as the KGON Tower. So thank you, and I'll turn it back to you, Max.
Awesome, thanks. And thank you, Michael. I wasn't able to attend then, but sounds like it was fun.
The tallest freestanding structure in the Northwest, Oregon or Washington.
Nice.
Tallest structure that doesn't have guy wires.
All right, so for time's sake, what I'll do is any additional news or announcements, we'll leave it for the end. And let's move on to the main presentation, which is an easy 2-meter antenna build. And this one was by John Portune. He's the guy that thought this up and built it. He wrote an article for QST, and that was in this last October 2020 edition. So there's 3 pages starting on page 30 that detail this particular antenna build. Because it's only 3 pages, it doesn't go through everything step by step. We'll try to actually do a little bit more step by step during this meeting. But if John ever sees this video, I want to say that from somebody who's built 2 of the antennas so far, it is fairly easy and it tunes up very nicely. So I really appreciate all his work. He does compare this particular antenna quite a bit with a 5-foot copper J-pole made out of copper water pipe. And it compares very favorably to that particular one. So this is the article that was in the QST. The picture is on the left-hand side. And hopefully you guys can see on the right-hand side, he actually did an elevation and azimuth free space radiation pattern diagram, where the one on the left is as if you're looking at the antenna, like the picture on the left from the side view. and it basically looks like a big donut. That's the radiation pattern, where there's a big null in the center. And then on the right-hand side is the radiation pattern if you're looking at it from the top down or a bird's eye view. So it's definitely an omnidirectional antenna. So Dan and I actually built a couple of these, and he came over and was able to tune it up very nicely. And he even mounted it on the side of his house, and I'll show you some pictures of that coming up here in just a minute. And this is the third page where he details connecting the wire to the copper strip in the back. So these are the pieces that you need in order to build this antenna. It is made out of 1 1/4 inch PVC pipe in about 3 feet. And you can either chop the just a 3-foot piece off of a PVC pipe, or if you wanted to like mount it to either the side of your house and maybe get some elevation with it, you could actually leave it at the 10-foot. You can buy this type of PVC pipe at any big box hardware store, and it runs about a little over $5 for a 10-foot section. So if you wanted to put it on the side of your house, you might consider actually leaving it 10 feet and just using the top 2 to 3 feet as the actual antenna and the rest of it as part of the mast. You'll also need an end cap, and that's just to kind of make it look pretty and also keep the water out of the center if you're going to put it outside. And then some copper foil tape. And you can buy copper foil tape on Amazon. A lot of people use it for keeping slugs out of their garden, or for electrically isolating their electric guitar. But it comes in very handy as a conductive antenna in place of antenna wire. There are several thicknesses that are for sale. I think 1.5 mil is about the thinnest that they sell it, but I've seen it at 2.5 and 3.5 mil on Amazon. 1.5 mil, I purchased a couple different kinds, and 1.5 mil is just fine to work with. I didn't really notice any difference in being able to apply the thinner stuff versus the thicker copper foil tape. You also need 12 feet of coax. I used RG8X because it is fairly flexible and pretty low loss for what it is. You can use either thicker or thinner, especially if you're only going 12 feet. Just realize that if you use like the really thin stuff, like I think it's is RG174, you might get a little bit more loss than with RG8X. You'll need 2 ring terminals. He calls for 6-inch ring terminals. In the videos that I'll show you, I used number 12 ring terminals, and it worked just fine because the screws that I used look exactly like what you see on the screen there, and that is 8-inch, or excuse me, number 8 half-inch screws. So you don't need anything very large. I think he calls for stainless steel in the article, but I just used zinc plated, which will hold up in weather pretty well. And then you'll also need some type of a way to kind of keep the coax in the center of the PVC pipe and just away from the copper foil tape as much as you can. And so what I ended up using was about a 6-inch by 12-inch piece of cardboard that I just rolled up and pushed up into the pipe. But you could use, the article calls for 12 inches of 3/4 inch PVC and a couple of end caps that you would drill holes in. But when I went to Home Depot, I found that the 3/4 inch end caps do not fit in the 1 1/4 inch PVC pipe. So you could make them fit just simply by shaving off the ends or the flange that's at the bottom. I decided I didn't want to do that much work. If you go to Lowe's or some other hardware store, you might be able to find some that fit. Or you can use something like bubble wrap or some other insulating material. And Dan actually used bubble wrap that seemed to work pretty well. Just a small piece, tape it around the coax, and then use either a stick or another smaller piece of PVC to kind of push it up in to the antenna. And then finally, you'll just need like a coax connector of your choice. So I ended up terminating mine into PL259s. But if you had either BNCs or SMAs, it's kind of whatever your antenna will hook up to. You can also use, what I plan on doing is just using an adapter or a pigtail to connect my radio to the RG8X. And that's just to simply take some of the stress off of the radio connector, like a handheld radio. All right, so I've made a few videos of this. And Dan, did you have any comments about just the general build or the ingredients?
No, it's it's pretty basic once you understand what it is, that you're going to be doing. And I think after folks watch the video, they'll get a much clearer idea. And I'll just say that I am not always the neatest and cleanest constructor, yet I put it together and it worked great. And I can even demonstrate the antenna, on the air after we go for a little bit here after you watch the video. And I think, if you have questions about how this works and what the build is, watching the video and getting our comments will sort of help clear that up. It's basically, in an electrical fashion, you would consider it a vertical dipole. In other words, the copper tape is split in half and fed with the coax. You have the upper and the lower half of a vertical dipole. And that's really what your antenna is. And the copper tape just makes a really convenient way to do that. And I think, Max, are you going to talk about possibly putting together some of the parts for availability for folks?
Yes. So anybody that wants to build this, there's really no need for each individual person that wants to build this to buy 66 feet of copper tape when all you really need is about 50 inches. So we are planning on putting together kind of just some kits. We'll try to help as much as we can for putting stuff together if people, for example, don't have a soldering iron. However, if you like kit building, if you think ham radio is in your future, I just highly encourage you to get some of the basic materials or supplies and tools that you would need in order to put something like this together. And it's really, the additional tools are a soldering iron, some wire cutters. One thing that really helped me was a crimper if you're going to put on a connector on the end. It is possible to put connectors on without it. It just makes it a little bit more difficult. And anybody that wants me to put on the connector on the end that doesn't want or doesn't have a crimper, I can definitely do that for you. But the basic supplies would essentially be the PVC pipe, the end caps, the copper tape, the ring terminals, the connector, things like that. So we'll get you guys set up. It'll take us a couple of weeks to get everything together because part of it depends on who would like a kit or 2 or 3. So just let us know. If you want to just put your name and email in the comments, that way I kind of know who would like a kit. All right, so I put some of the videos together. One of the first things that I did was measure the copper foil tape and then mark the center. Go ahead, Dan.
Max, if I can interrupt, perhaps if you have the antenna there, can you just pick it up and show it to people so they get a visualization before we actually go to the build so that they can have, a really good sense of what this is, when we're talking. Basically, we kind of call it the barber pole. You're basically wrapping this copper tape around the PVC pipe. And then, that's just so you have a little better visualization of what that is. Sorry to interrupt, but I just thought
no problem.
Yeah, so that way when you're looking at the construction, you can kind of have the end product in mind and kind of see what the results are.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point, Dan. So to get it in the frame, this is the antenna part up top here. It's approximately 19 inches from top to bottom, and it'll be a little bit different depending on how you tune it. There's an end cap up here on top, and then in the center, there's a hole that's drilled. John, the guy that designed this antenna, said he drilled a 3/4 inch hole into his pipe. This right here is a 1/2 inch hole, and I just used a 1/2 inch wood drill bit to get this in here. Not the easiest because wood drill bits tend to grab onto it right before it goes through, so you do have to be a little bit careful that you don't whip the drill around. You can also use stepper bits, which look like cones, and that may be a lot easier for PVC. And you would just simply drill to between about 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch. You can see here, this is the center conductor that I crimped, and I did solder to the very end of the connector here, and then it's just screwed right into the PVC pipe, and this is the 1/2 inch screw, and the same with the outer braid of the coax, so basically the other side of the antenna, and that's also screwed to the copper tape through the PVC. One comment, I did pre-drill the holes for these, which just makes it that much easier to put the screws in, because I could just stick the screw right into the hole and then just use the screwdriver and with one hand put that in there. And if anybody has any questions, just let me know. And sometimes I have to, it is going to focus for me. I can go through a little bit about how to separate the copper braid out a little bit. It's fairly easy, but sometimes it can be a little bit challenging because this braid here is really, it is braided all around the dielectric insulating center there. And so I used a wooden skewer to kind of pick at the copper braid, and that really got everything out and lined up in one direction. And then I twisted it and crimped it to the connector. And then on the bottom of mine, I put in a just another a T so that I could see if I can get this off here. So the you can see that the coax goes through or out the side of the T and then onto another PVC pipe. And I just drilled a hole through the PVC pipe here, wrapped it around about 6 times, and then I measured out where it was and made a mark after I wrapped it, and then drilled another hole and pushed the copper or the coax through, and then that coax comes out the end here. And so the nice thing is that that locks this coax in this position, and this is a choke ballon. So if you do have any common mode RF that comes down the coax, this essentially stops it. Not true, not really important if you're only going to use 5 watts, but a little bit more important if you're going to hook this up to a mobile. So this is one way to do it. And you'll also see that I just have it on a piece of wood that you could just put this on a table or next to a window, like on a windowsill. And I used a metal flange to secure it to the board, and then just some additional PVC connectors to put that to the T. So here, this is the second antenna that I built. The first one is somewhat similar in that I still use the T, but for the common mode choke, I just wrapped 6 loops around and secured them with the zip ties. And so that's another way. And then on the very end, I have for about 12 feet, I have about, I would say, almost 6 feet of coax left over to then attach to your radio.
Just a couple of comments here. uh, uh, I first tried the antenna by undoing the balun, and adding that choke balun made a huge difference in performance, even at 5 watts. So I would strongly recommend. What that is, if you're not familiar, like Max showed, it's 6 turns, around. It can either be loose or around the PVC form. And basically what that is, when you're looking at coax, just kind of like it says, it has a center connector, then it has an outer shield. And by turning and making that what we call a balun, balanced to unbalanced, that's where the word comes from. What it does is it stops currents from flowing on the outside of the coax shield, which can get back into your radio and degrade the performance of the antenna and degrade the performance of the radio. So for an antenna like this, I would just say go ahead and consider the balun, as because I thought, I don't know if I need it. I tried it without it, and I wasn't too successful. And I went on the balun, and it made quite a difference. So I would recommend even a lower power. And it's pretty simple to do. So.
Yeah, that's a good point,
Yeah.
Dan. It probably just tunes up a little bit better, more stable, right?
Yeah, it just keeps everything more stable. In fact, I've got a 2-meter J pole that's up quite a bit higher that it really doesn't work as well as this antenna, and I'm thinking it's part of it is because I didn't bother to put a choke balun. So that's something I'm going to be changing. Because this little guy I put up, and I only put it up about 5-6 feet off the ground, and it's working great. I was really surprised.
That's great. And you probably want to put that balun, which is essentially about 6 wraps of coax, as close as you can to the antenna. So rather than putting those 6 wraps in the ham shack, put it as close to the antenna as you can get it. Cool. So the idea behind this antenna, also just keep in mind, is this is it's essentially an off-center dipole. Rather than a mag mount antenna, which uses a ground plane, you still have 2 sides of the antenna. So the upper side, which is what you connect the center of the coax to, and the lower side is normally what would be a ground plane. So the author says 3.5 turns on the top and 4.5 turns on the bottom. The article gives a pretty good description of the measurements for these. The article describes the measurements a little bit longer than you will need, and that's just so it's a little bit easier to trim off the material than it is to add on when you're first starting to tune.
Actually, we had a question in the chat about waterproofing, and actually, what I did with my antenna, and I don't know if you still have the extra parts there, what the author suggested in the article was taking a 2-inch piece of PVC, putting an end cap on that, and then you can slide it over the top of the existing antenna there. You can see, if you look up in the top, this is a 2-inch piece that is covering the antenna. And thus, that should be able to keep, a lot of the water and moisture out of the antenna. And it has no effect upon or very minimal effect on the radiation qualities. Also, as you can see, this is pretty close to my house, and it's not very high off the ground. It's not an optimum location, but I took about 5 minutes and put it up on a little fence post and kind of duct taped it in place. And I'm amazed how well it works.
Yeah, and that's great, Dan, because I think, but when I was kind of picturing people making this antenna, I was picturing, people mounting it to the eave of their roof, and of course that can, you have to get out the ladder and you have to get brackets for it. But this right here, Dan simply duct taped it to an existing fence post, I think, that you already had. Is that right, Dan?
Yeah, what it is just one of those green metal fence post that you push in. So I just grabbed it, from the back, pushed it into the ground, about maybe a foot. It's got a little spot on it where you can step on it and press it in. So I just did that till it felt pretty stable, in the garden, and then duct taped the antenna to it. Took about 5 minutes. And, I thought, well, we'll just see how quick and easy. And then it's a little hard to see here, but the coax is entering into a window with my windows in the basement. You can just see the corner of the window down there. And the coax enters in. And that's where my Radio Shack is.
Cool. And let me. Can you see that one? That shows a little bit more about where the coax enters. The great thing about this antenna, and the great thing about Dan's installation here, is that if you just have a handheld and you want to check into either nets or you want to try to contact people through Simplex, this antenna is going to give you much better results than trying to use your handheld radio in the house with a rubber duck antenna. So if you would like to try to build this, I highly encourage you to do that. It's fairly easy. The first time it took me about an hour and a half. That's because I didn't really know what I was doing. I was also filming a lot of it, so it took even longer. All right, so let's go back to the videos. So one of the first things that I did was I measured out the foil, and I found that 23 inches on the top and 24 inches on the bottom is actually a really good starting point. You probably will end up having to trim off approximately 1 inch on both the top and the bottom to get the antenna tuned properly. You can also use the directions that are in the QST article. You'll probably have to trim off up to 4 or 5 inches, but that's okay. If you have an antenna analyzer, it's fairly easy to do that. So here's a video of me just measuring out the foil. And I found the best way to do this is to use some tape as markers first, and put the marker down at 24 inches, and then again at 48 inches. And so right now what I'm doing is I'm cutting off the whole piece of foil at 48 inches. And then I took a drill bit, just a small drill bit, and used it kind of as an awl to just lightly press down on the copper foil and make a mark at 23 and 24 inches. I'm sorry, 24 and 25 inches. And that is the place where I'm going to cut off the center. So once I wrap the foil around, I'm going to cut that 1 inch section, and that's going to be the off-center middle of the dipole. So the next thing that I did was I wrapped around a 2 inch piece of cardstock, and it's 2 inches by 54 inches. And there is only one particular angle that will work when you wrap this 2 inch piece of cardstock, or you could use plastic or shelf liner, anything that is 2 inches in width and approximately 54 inches in length will work. And you'll see what I do is it takes me a few seconds to kind of line up the correct angle. And I'm starting approximately 1 inch down from the top. And so I did use a Sharpie to first mark 1 inch down from the top. And that's where I put the very peak of that blue cardstock paper. My cardstock paper was only 12 inches, so 8.5 by 12 inch, or 11, rather 8.5 by 11. So what I ended up doing is just making several 2 inch strips and then just taping them together with packing tape. And if you're joining us on the repeater, this is the Portland Amateur Radio monthly meeting. And tonight we are building a simple 2-meter PVC antenna that works really well and is very easy to build. And you can find out more information on our website, www.w7lt.org. And if anybody's, go ahead, Dan.
Oh, there was another question if they wanted to know if the videos will be posted on the YouTube site.
Yes, so I can post these videos on the YouTube site, or we'll post this meeting video also. So either one you can take a look at to build. So here I am at the very end. I taped it every turn, and that's really just to keep it from unraveling. And hopefully if I did these videos in order, the next video is gonna show you how to then take I used a thin marker Sharpie, and it took me a few minutes to search the house for one. I knew I had one, but wasn't quite sure where it was. And I just started marking from the bottom. I do recommend you kind of start marking from the top. It just meant that I had a little bit more room at the top than I needed, that you could either cut off or just leave. And all I'm doing is just using the Sharpie to mark directly on the PVC, and then just using my hand, because this is removable painter's tape. It's very easy just to kind of push it out of the way as I'm marking it up the pole. And because the paper is 2 inches and the copper foil is only 1 inch, that is what makes the copper foil kind of look like a barber pole, because it has a 1 inch gap between the turns. All right, I'm gonna skip ahead just a little bit. So once I have this all done, then I take the copper foil. Now this is the critical point. This getting the angle right here and aligning it with your Sharpie marker will kind of dictate whether or not you do a really good job or a very poor job of staying on the line. And so all I'm doing here is just trying to get the angle correct so that as I twist the copper foil around the pole, that it essentially stays right next to the Sharpie marker that I made. I also recommend having 2 people do this. One person can just kind of hold the pipe on the table while the other person applies the copper foil. As you can see, what I'm trying to do is use a lateral motion with my left hand to try to keep the copper foil on the line. Hopefully you don't have to move it too much, because every time you move it just a little bit, it just leaves wrinkles in the copper tape, which essentially doesn't affect performance all that much, but it either makes it look pretty or not pretty. If you make a lot of these antennas, you'll get very good at it, I promise you. But I do recommend, if you have somebody that can help you, just hold the end of the PVC and turn it as you are slowly applying the tape. It's a lot easier.
I'll just comment here that if you looked at mine, you'd see a lot of wrinkles, and having that 2-inch piece of PVC pipe drop over it covers it all up, so you'll never see it, and it didn't affect it. So I wouldn't get too worried, although it's certainly very helpful to get it as accurately on the spiral as possible. But don't despair if you don't have it exact. Part of this is a learning experience and fun. And, if you goofed up with the tape, you can always take it off and redo the tape again. This is not, and you're not going to be out any kind of big expense. Well, if you notice, he's making a continuous wrap. He has not cut the foil or drilled the hole as yet for the other. So this is all one continuous wrap.
And the tape, like if you do kind of mess up a little bit, you can back up by just pulling it back up. It'll wrinkle a little bit, but like Dan said, don't worry about the wrinkles so much. So here I have already made the marks when I was measuring and cutting the foil. And now all I'm doing is using a box knife to just kind of lightly press. You don't need very much pressure to cut this foil tape. And then I'm removing that 1-inch piece that I put in there. And that is where you drill the hole for the connecting it to the coax.
Yeah, just to come in here, Max has a 1/2-inch hole. I followed the directions in the article and used a 3/4-inch hole, which seemed pretty big. But the nice thing about having a 3/4-inch hole is it made it pretty easy to fish the coax out of the center of the pipe. Although a 1/2-inch hole is probably more than adequate. So part of it depends upon the tools and what you have available, to work with.
So it would seem that another way to do it would be to push the coax through from the outside instead of trying to fish it through from the inside.
Well, you could, but I think it's more stable to have it on the inside where it's weather protected.
No, what I meant was push it through and then feed it through the pipe. So it would still be the same thing, but instead of trying to get it to come up through the hole, you're now pushing it down into the hole.
Oh, yeah. I guess you could, sure. Yeah, I mean, you could feed it from either end. Yeah, as far as that goes. With the 3/4-inch hole, it was very easy to fish out. So,
and then I think kind of depends on if you are using a piece of coax with the connector already on it, you would need to fish it through unless you had like an SMA. But to Herb's point, that's exactly what I did is because I started with just a piece of coax with no connectors on either end, I ended up just pushing it from the outside down. So that's a very good point.
Oh, yeah.
All right, this is where I separated the braid out, twisted it into both sides into just kind of like something that looked like a piece of wire. I ended up tying both sides just like a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch on each side. And that just helped make it stick a little bit better. I think the author of this article ended up not using solder at all. And so he ended up just crimping it on, which is certainly fine. The one step I'm also missing that's different from the article is John ended up using about 2 or 3 inches of the braid and the center of the coax, and then putting heat shrink on it. And that you could certainly do that. I just found that separating the coax and then just twisting them, and you only need about 1/2 inch or a little bit more on each side.
All right, Max, we might explain to folks who wouldn't know what heat shrink is.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they're not familiar with that. It's actually pretty cool stuff that you can use quite a bit. It's, it's tubular shaped and comes in various sizes. You can slip right over a wire if it's bare. And then what you do is you apply a small amount of heat, either from a soldering gun, or you could even use something like a hairdryer with a high. And what happens is that coating will shrink with the heat around the wire and make an insulation where you previously had to cut it away, which is what I did. I did go ahead and put some heat shrink on there, but it is an option.
That's a very good point. Here's a piece of because it's green and I'm using a green screen, that's not going to work. Let me get a piece of black. So this is a larger piece of heat shrink. This is what they call double wall heat shrink. So it is a little bit firmer than normal heat shrink. I love this stuff. I use this in almost all of my projects. It's wonderful. I even help other people with their projects with this stuff. I have a bunch of different sizes. This happens to be 1/2 inch. And I use a SMD desoldering iron, which is like a small hair dryer, and it works really well. Other people do use like either a blowtorch or a match. You just got to be careful that you don't burn it. But it's wonderful stuff. And if you don't have any in your kit, definitely get some of this.
And for people who aren't familiar with it, it shrinks by a factor of about 2. So that's sort of a guide, you know, if it's 3 times the size you need, it's not going to shrink enough. But that's a good guide.
That's a great point. Yeah, so I have often put heat shrink on that's been quite a tight fit, and sometimes that isn't a great idea either because it doesn't work as well. But just put it on so it's loose and then heat it up. So this is also not in the article, but essentially what I'm doing is I'm just bolting or screwing a metal flange onto a piece of wood. And it doesn't have to be a very big piece. This is only about 4 inches by 8 inches. And it seems to be stable enough that it will hold the antenna that's about 3 feet high and not tip over. Then I also put it's a 1 inch threaded to a 1 1/4 inch slip PVC fitting on there. And then I used that to connect the antenna.
I don't think you're sharing your screen anymore.
Say that again?
I'm seeing it.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I don't think you're sharing your video. If you're showing a video, I don't think you're sharing it right now.
Thank you. Thanks.
Actually, Max, we might want to go back up a little bit and show how we attach the feed line to the antenna.
Yes. That is a good point.
Before we do that, let's just show to finish that process of where you attach the feed line to the middle of the antenna.
Okay. And you guys can see this now? Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a good point. I don't think that I made a video of that, but after this video, I will.
Yeah, we talked briefly about it, but we might just show them again.
So again, this is just a metal flange that I bolted to or screwed to a piece of 1/2 inch plywood. And then I can use that then to connect the antenna. All right. So this is, let's see how close I can get. There we go. This is the center conductor, and the white is the dielectric insulator that separates the outer braid from the center conductor. And so when you cut this, just cut about 3/4 of an inch to an inch off, and cut the black outer sheath of the coax. Be careful not to cut too many strands of the braided part, and then just kind of pull that braided part apart. It's a little bit like trying to get a Barbie doll's hair separated out nicely. But eventually, if you work at it for a few minutes, you can actually just use your fingers to kind of twist the outer shield into one wire. And then the inner shield, you want to just separate and leave about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. And you want to either crimp and or solder that to the, what do they call these? The eye connector, I guess, or the ring connector. And then you can just screw that in with these. And again, I pre-drilled these holes using an 1/8 inch drill bit, and then a number 8 1/2 inch screw works really well. And Dan, do you want to show yours?
Yeah, I was just going to show if I don't know if people can see the raw end of the coax. This would be before, so you can see the outer shield and the inner conductor. And that's where you're going to be attaching to ring terminals too. And I'll give you a hint. If you're headed to the dentist anytime soon, ask him if he's got some of those little tools that that he's often poking around where you don't want him to be in your mouth. And oftentimes they'll throw those out or reuse them, or give them away after a certain amount of time. But I have a whole collection of those dental tools, and they work great for things like combing out the braid on the coax. And they're very nice and very sharp, and they work really well for those. You'll find all kinds of uses for them. I don't use those for cleaning my teeth myself, but
little home dentistry.
This place where you were recommending to use heat shrink over it once you've separated out and done this, or was the heat shrink for another part? I guess I missed where that was recommended.
Yeah, I put the heat shrink on before you put the ring terminals.
Yeah.
Right. And that would help just to waterproof everything. Also, there's another compound that you can use once you get it situated. There's a really good weatherproofing compound. It's called coax seal, and it comes in a little wrap, and it kind of looks like silly putty. And you can peel off a little bit, and you can stick that with your thumbs over the connection, which will help to waterproof everything. And it stays pliable for many years. I've had antennas 4, 5, 6, 7 years with the coaxial and still flexible. You can pull it off. That's a really good way to waterproof it.
That's great. Yeah, that's great, Dan. Let me sorry, hang on. So this is from the article, and this just shows where he took the center conductor, which is the one on the upper side, and heat shrink that. And then he also added some heat shrink to the braid in the lower section. I didn't do, so this to me looks like it's about 2.5 to 3 inches of heat shrink, and separating out the two cables. I ended up doing a little bit less than that, and I didn't use heat shrink for this, but it depends on your building style if you want to use it or not. I don't think either one is going to hurt the antenna performance at all. And somebody asked if it matters which one you connect. Marley asked, which one you connect to which. So the center conductor, you want to connect to the top helix, and the braided shield, you want to connect that to the bottom. You can connect them the other way around. I don't know if it affects tuning too much, but the author, that's kind of what he recommends, is the top is the center and the shield is the bottom.
Yeah, it'll affect the radiation pattern. So you'll basically be upside down. So you want to make sure that your center connector is always to the top. Here's the coax seal, and it comes in a little roll and a little strip. And I use this on almost all my coax connections outdoors, and it works quite well in our weather. You'd be surprised how quickly rain and moisture can get into antenna connections and cause corrosion. So this stuff is called coax seal. I think I've had this roll for, 2 or 3 years, and it's like $5 a roll. Good investment.
Yeah, that's a good point. The other thing is, if you are going to put this outdoors, the author does recommend sealing this with either what Dan just showed you, the whole area. So if you just wrap some of that coax seal, maybe like 1.5 inches around here, just to kind of seal everything up, that prevents rain and water from getting in here, and also corroding the solder connections and where it connects to the copper foil. The rest of it you can actually leave as is, or a better way would be to use the radome, which is the 2-inch piece of PVC with a 2-inch cap. The author says that the copper foil will turn green, kind of get a patina look, but it doesn't necessarily affect the operation of the antenna.
One quick addition. Don't use any kind of silicone or silicon caulk because what happens is if you think of it, when you use it, it releases what's called acetic acid. And it's kind of got that smell. And that will corrode your connections. So be sure to use something that is designed for electrical connections, and that's where this coaxial, or there are some other products. But you wouldn't want to use any regular caulking compound to waterproof seal, because you'll find that eventually everything will corrode and your connections will go. You can ask me how I know that. I learned the hard way.
That's great. Thanks, Dan. All right, so I'm going to go back to the videos. This is my final video where I'm tuning up the antenna. This video is a little over 5 minutes long, but I'm going to actually skip forward between the tests. So what I'm doing is I first took the antenna outside because you want to. That's a great place to get a SWR signal or tune your antenna. Because if you're doing it inside of a garage or something like that, you can very easily, or if you're holding it next to your body, it'll affect the SWR. So here what I'm using is a, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's a...
Oh, is that the Rig Expert?
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, yes.
Rig Expert. It's the... Rig Expert AA600. It's one of the older models. They have, I think the newer models are called the Zoom, and this will go up from HF up to 600 megahertz. So it's great for tuning a lot of different antennas, including 2 meters and 440. It's not cheap, but once you have one, they are great. There are other more inexpensive options out there. They make, I think, a smaller unit that you either have to connect to a computer through the USB. I think those are only $50. So what I'm doing now is I noticed that the SWR, or the frequency at which the SWR is really low, is less than 146 megahertz. And I'm doing plus and minus 15 megahertz. So it's well outside of the 2 meter band. And as I'm trimming, you want to trim off the top and the bottom equally first to kind of get that frequency, the dip that you see, the bottom of the V, centered around that 146 megahertz. And every time I'm doing it, I'm only taking off a little bit at a time. And so it's going up very slowly. And I'm also taking off a little bit on the top and then measuring it, going back and taking a little off the bottom. The reason is because it's free to test the antenna once you buy the unit. And sometimes you might be surprised that what just a little off the top or the bottom will do. But essentially, what I found is that I have to take a little bit off the top and bottom in equal portions, and I'm only doing about 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch each time. And each time it's going up just a little bit. So let me skip forward here just a little bit to where I still have it zoomed out quite a bit. So this is plus and minus 15 megahertz. But eventually, I think on this next test, there we go. That's really close, but I think I trimmed it one more time to get it really close. So that's pretty darn close. It might be a little bit too low. Eventually here, you'll see that I brought the range down or tightened it up a little bit to plus and minus 2 megahertz. So it's 144 to 148. 144 is on the left-hand side of the graph. 148 is on the high side. And you can see that it starts out at about 1.3, 1.4. Let me just back up there a little bit so you guys can see that. All right. So the center of the graph is 146. The bottom of the graph or the left-hand side is 144, and the top is 148. Anything below about 1.5 is really good. You can spend all day getting it down to 1.2 or below, but there's a diminishing returns curve that starts to creep in. And I can tell you that's better SWR between 144 and 148 than even my mag mount on my car that I measured also. So it just tells me that this antenna is actually pretty well tuned, but I got to go work on my mag mount next. And we got pretty similar results, I think, Dan, didn't we, when we tuned yours?
Yeah. Once we took it outside, remember, if you recall, we were inside the garage and kind of got some false numbers. And we might point out to a lot of folks, you probably don't have access to this kind of testing gear. So one of the things is we would be happy to work out some way, considering the current environment where we could arrange somehow to be able to help tune your antenna. Because, to buy one of these devices is a pretty serious commitment, although they're very useful. But I think they're about $500 or $600 for this model. If you want a really good one, there are options, but we'll help people, to get these tuned appropriately.
Yeah, absolutely. We can have probably several different dates where we'll meet outdoors, and we will also wear masks, but we will allow you to we'll help you tune it. And I like to kind of give you guys the box knife and the antenna tuner, and then you guys can kind of tune it yourself. I think you learn a lot when you do something yourself, and we can kind of be there to help you if you run into any issues. Brian asked if you can tune without a rig expert or an antenna analyzer. Unfortunately, not that I'm aware of. Dan, you've been in radio a lot longer than I have.
Well, if you get your dimensions pretty close, you're going to be within the ballpark. And, the proof would be in the pudding. You could put it up and go, can I access antennas? Eventually, yes, I would tune it. And there are many less expensive SWR meters. The SWR meter will sort of tell you what the standing wave ratio, that's what SWR, which is when the antenna is resonant. It doesn't exactly help you figure out the exact frequency. So that's one of the benefits. So you could put it together and get it up and running and see how it works for you. But eventually, I think it would be smart to try to go ahead and get that tuned. You'll just lose a little bit of efficiency, but you won't be, creating any real problems as long as you're within the general ballpark of the dimensions. Your efficiency will be less if it's off the mark, but you could certainly do that and get it pretty close. You want me to? Should I demonstrate how it accesses the repeater?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, you guys see my installation there, and I'm going to access this repeater and make some comments so you can get. Let's see. Do I need to shut down my audio connection?
No, I can do that for you. And this is going to be on the 14718.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So hopefully folks can hear it. So are we ready?
Yep.
Okay.
This is N7CQR testing the Park antenna radio build. I'm accessing the 147.18 repeater with 5 watts and this is, is about maybe 4 or 5 feet off the ground in my backyard. N7 CQR.
That's awesome. Yeah, you sounded great, Dan. Somebody else commented that you sound very good. 5'9". The repeater that he's talking through does have a nice antenna system. It is up on a high hill. However, I will say that probably some of you, depending on your location in Portland or the surrounding area, I know I cannot talk into that repeater with a handheld with a rubber duck, no matter what room I am standing in my house. I would have to go outside, and even then it's a bit questionable. However, with this antenna and 5 watts on a handheld, with the antenna outside, mounted a couple feet off the ground at a minimum, I'm sure I would be able to hit the repeater also and have a good signal. So I really encourage you guys, if you want to build something like this, just give me your name and your email on text. I'll also send an email out in case anybody else misses this and is watching the video at a later date. And then we'll give you, a week or so to build it, and then we'll try to arrange a way for us to get together outside in a safe way to tune the antenna. Any questions from anybody on Zoom?
This is Mitch.
Hey, Mitch.
Hey, how's it going, Max?
Good.
Do we think this antenna is circularly polarized?
That is a good question. I know that the way that the author explained it is that it is, it's a loaded antenna in the sense that if, for those of you who've seen mag mounts, just picture a mag mount on a truck, a CV antenna with the coil at the bottom. So that is a loaded antenna. That means that instead of being the full, is it 17, 18 feet, it's a shorter antenna because it's using turns of wire to shorten the length of the antenna. This antenna is the same concept, except this antenna is completely loaded. So I think that they call it discrete loading when you're only using turns for part of the antenna, and continuously loaded when you have the helix throughout the whole antenna. So I don't know if it's yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think it's circularly polarized because basically it's a shortened vertical dipole. So I think the general polarization would be vertical as opposed to circular. Although I could be wrong, but he had his easy neck diagrams in the article. And what that is for folks who go, what are they talking about? It's basically a computer plot projection of what the antenna radiates. But my guess would be, without a lot of research, that it would generally be a vertical polarization. But somebody with more experience could tell that even better. I don't know, Mitch, what do you think? Is Mitch still there?
Yeah, you're muted, Mitch. Oh, there you go.
No, sorry. I would agree. I think your analysis is correct. I think it's a vertical, but just curious. Thanks.
Yeah. Like you said, it's a kind of a short and loaded vertical dipole. I think that's what we're looking at. Yeah.
I got a couple of questions about it. So the first one is so it seems very clear how to do the one end of the coax that connects to the copper tape. The part of the coax that's eventually going into your radio after you do the loops, that connector for something like the FT60R, like is that something that crimps onto the coax, or how would you connect that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the FT60R uses a SMA connector. I have not actually ever crimped or soldered an SMA connector onto coax, what I end up usually doing is just using a PL259. And for those of you who this is the 3-piece crimp to PL259, and you can get these at Ham Radio Outlet, and they run about $2.60 a piece. They are very nice. I think they're a little bit higher quality than other stuff that you could get off of eBay, but essentially you can prepare the coax to go into this top connector. You have to remember to put on the ring, the outer ring, and then the crimp ring onto the coax before you solder, if you do solder on the end of this. I have many times soldered this on and then forgot all about these, and then you have to cut it off and use another connector. So that's one way. It does help if you have a crimp tool in order to crimp this small piece, this small ring onto it. However,
from that to an SMA connector.
I'll show you here a couple of options. One thing is that the coax can also be purchased in ready-made lengths. Generally, 5, 10, 15, 20-foot lengths. So it wouldn't hurt if you had a little extra length, within reason. You don't want to, you want to try to keep it as short as you can. But if you have an idea of about where you're going to mount it or how you're going to use it, you could purchase a ready-made length of coax with the PL259s on both ends. That way you wouldn't have to, do the crimping or soldering. And that might be a reasonable option for some folks. You do pay a little more for that. And, you're sort of stuck with a predetermined length. And from there, once you get to PL259, if you can see this that I'm holding up, what this is a PL259 to SMA cable. It's a very short cable that would adapt, and at this end would go into your handheld. Now, the one fascinating part about this, if you wish to say, is that the Baofeng's, the antenna adapter is made backwards from like most of the other SMA adapters. So you need the male to female adapter as opposed to what you would use on an FT60. So that's just one of those things that if you were to go to Ham Radio Outlet, let's say, and purchase a pre-made length of coax, an adapter like this, you have a Baofeng, you will still need what is known as a male-female adapter to get it into the radio. And to make sure that, I just take the radio with you and make sure that all those pieces come together and work. That's certainly an option for you.
That makes a lot of sense. So the other thing is, there was talk about bubble wrap or cardboard for the inside of the PVC pipe. So I don't know if I missed that in the video or if I misunderstood.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Dan. Do you want to?
Oh, sure. I was just going to say, can you pick up the antenna there and show them? Yeah. And once he gets that in view, I think it'll become a little clearer.
Yeah. So what?
Your picture's gone. There you go.
Yeah. So what I put this this on here, the T, so I can't take it off very far. But if you look up in there, what essentially I did, this is the other end of the antenna. I just took a piece of cardboard and wrapped it around the coax about 12 inches in length. And you want to make the wrap tight enough that you can fit in here. If you can't fit it on the inside, then just take off some more cardboard, just cut some of the cardboard.
Matt, turn and show the antenna on the spiral end. And
yeah, this end?
The other way, 90 degrees, lengthwise.
This way?
Okay. And the coax should not be touching the sides of the wall where the spiral is. And that's the purpose of that wrap. Because if the coax is butting up against there, you have potential interference. So the idea is to keep the coax centered in the pipe, particularly during where the spiral, after you get past the spiral section, it's really not as critical.
Yeah, it doesn't matter down
and
here.
all I did was I just had some bubble wrap around, and I wrapped a couple turns of bubble wrap around there, which pushed up into this section where it attaches quite nicely. And that seemed to be enough, to kind of keep the coax centered in the pipe. Hopefully that.
Construction, did you just use a piece of cardboard tubing that's that's in between the coax and the PVC then, or?
Yeah, you could.
Yeah, you could use that. I just used a piece of cardboard about 6 inches by 12 inches, and then just wrapped it around the coax, and then pushed that kind of wrapped.
Like spiral wrapped it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yep.
Or like I said, it was materials on hand. I was looking around and I go, gee, I've got tons of this bubble wrap. Like most of us, we're all doing our deliveries online these days, and I seem to be collecting, miles of bubble wrap. And I thought, well, that'll work pretty well. So I just wrapped a few turns, taped it around the coax, so the coax is in the bubble wrap, and it slid right up into the pipe without any problem. So you could even find other solutions.
Yeah, now that I understand the rationale, like what was trying to be achieved by those, I mean, essentially it's just a spacer.
Yeah. You're just trying to keep the coax in the middle of the pipe. Yep. And it just reduces the interference.
Yeah, Robert, go ahead.
Did you say at the beginning that you'd also operated on 70 centimeters with this antenna?
So I did not, and I haven't measured the SWR. I will later this week, and I can let you guys know on the groups.io. But I think, Dan, didn't you say that somebody built it and it worked better on 440, or is that may have been?
Well, I mean, I just had a contact, but that was kind of anecdotal, and it may work on 440, but I wouldn't expect that. That may just be, a bonus, but I wouldn't be prepared for that. There is probably a way to make it a more successful dual band antenna, but primarily I think it's going to be of use for 2 meters. There's certainly no reason you couldn't scale this down and make a smaller version for 440, for 70 centimeters. And that's certainly an option. And it would just be smaller, the same principle. You'd have to get the dimensions for the copper tape, but it would be smaller and shorter. And that wouldn't be a difficult project at all.
Might also be interesting to try to build one at 6 meters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you could probably orient this thing, going back to
horizontally or vertically, right?
Yeah. You could use it for horizontal polarization. And for those folks who may not know, 6 meters, and even on 2 meters, if you're using other modes like single sideband or Morse code, CW as we call it, often those modes are propagated horizontally. In other words, turning the antenna 90 degrees instead of a vertical configuration. So that's certainly, you could scale this up or down. Heck, you could probably do one for 10 meters.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because you could probably fit that on a 10-foot PVC or less. So for the kit, I did price out all of the components, and they came to almost $20. I think that's what we'll price the kit at. We're not trying to make any type of profit with this, and I'll contact everybody by email and make arrangements for either pickup or a central drop-off location. I'm kind of excited to have everybody give it a try. Feel free to email Dan or myself if you have any questions. Take a look at the video and just take a look at the, review this video in general. We'll give you some good options. I'm also going to put in the chat another YouTube video that was done for a satellite amateur radio group, and the author of this antenna design gave the talk. He didn't describe necessarily how to build it, but more just more of the technical details of it. So if you're interested in that, it's not too long. take a look. Somebody asked, Marilee asked if there might be less corrosion with copper or brass connectors. Yes, so I believe that these connectors I'm using are probably zinc coated, and the copper foil is probably not going to act very well with that, but it probably is going to take years and years before it affects any of the connections. And it's not so much electrical connection as it is capacitive connection that's required for an antenna like this. But thank you for the question.
I was wondering also if some people know a reasonable cost like soldering island and crimping tool that's like not super crazy expensive but still quality. If there are those tips, it would be great to have it with materials for it. I think there's probably a few people that would be interested in picking some up for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Ham Radio Outlet does sell a crimping tool. I believe you have to buy some extra dies for coax crimping. However, I can tell you that it is well worth the money. I think they run about $35, $40, and then the extra die set runs about $15. But it just makes life so much easier for not only crimping coax, but also putting and crimping power pole connectors, which we will have one of our upcoming beginning ham radio meetings talk about power poles.
There was also a comment in the chat, about the Hako soldering iron, which is one that I purchased fairly recently, and that has been a very nice iron. The prices vary a little bit, but you can get less expensive ones. But if you think you're going to be somewhat serious about soldering, the Hako would be one that I would recommend. And there are other good ones as well, but that's perhaps a good place to start, which, Max kind of brings up, we should do a presentation on tools.
Yeah, I'll
Absolutely.
second that. I'll second the Hako recommendation. If you're going to solder more than 10 or 20 solder joints, or you're going to build a kit, buy a temperature controlled iron. And I'm on my second one because I cut the cord on the first one accidentally, but I've used it with hundreds of hours, and if you take care of it, it will last pretty much forever. Has lots of different tips that go with it, and it's a really reliable tool.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.